Okay, so I have my finished image. I saved it, I exported it as an SVG. Now I want to export it in a way that I can upload to the internet into PhotoBucket. So I'm going to export it as a PNG, then download. Now remember, it's going to be untitled, so I have to go to downloads immediately, find the untitled PNG, and rename it. So I'm calling it assignment 6 black vector, because we're also going to do a color one. It's a PNG. I'm going to bring that out to the desktop and then put it into my assignment 6 folder. So it's up to you guys, since we're not on shared workstations anymore. Even if we end up going back to them, it's up to you guys to organize your work and be able to access it. And ideally, you would save it to 2 places, to your own computer and then also to either a thumb drive or to a Dropbox account. So these are the 2 file types you need, an SVG, which is a vector format, and a PNG. Now the PNG is not going to be super high resolution if you just use whatever the defaults are. So this is why it matters, right? So let's see, for the PNG, how big do we actually want it? I think we want it to be, let's try 2,000 pixels wide. Then download. Because it's a vector, we should be able to size it to any raster size we want. But we want it to look good. We don't want it to look shabby. So 2,000 should be plenty big. Then I take that untitled one, save it to my desktop. I'm going to compare it with the one that's only 600 or so pixels. Bring it in here. So let's open them up side by side. And notice how it's on a light gray background. There is no background. So now I have to zoom in all this way in order to even just start seeing the little stair steps. Look how clean the X looks. So I think 2,000 pixels wide is a good resolution just to put it online, right? But make sure you have the SVG saved for yourself. And you can kind of look around it on all sides. Looks really good. So I could upload that PNG right to PhotoBucket. The problem is it's a little lopsided, right, within the square. So I'm going to open it up in Preview. And this is on a Mac. So if you have a Mac, you can do this. But you can also do this in whatever image editing software you have, though you're not required to do it. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of crop around it. And in Preview on a Mac, you just hit Command K, and that will crop to center it, right? So your free-floating PNG is centered now. And then the PNG, black and white vector is number 2. All right, so we've got our first one. Now we're going to work on a color version, right? Well, that would be the next thing that we need to submit. And there's certain things we can do in Photoshop that we can't do in Vector, or that we can do in Photopea that we can't do in Vector, such as add a stroke around it, an offset, or add a drop shadow. So let's see how we would do that. Now that we've saved it as a PNG, we can open up Photopea. Okay, so now I'm in Photopea, and I opened up my PNG cropped vector. And because it was a PNG, this is the PNG version, not the SVG, it's already locked to a certain resolution, right? Which is good for online viewing. We can actually see exactly what that is if we go to image size. And we can look at it in inches instead of just pixels. So basically it's 13 by 19 inches by 72 pixels per inch. We make sure it's locked and not resample. We can see what that would print to at 300 pixels per inch. And that means it would print roughly the size of basically a 3x5 index card really cleanly, which is a good size for a logo. So that's fine. That's what 2000 pixels wide gives us. So I'm going to go ahead and that's not resampling. So I didn't grow it or shrink it. This is keeping the same resolution that we outputted it as a PNG out of the vector program. Now, this might help you breathe a sigh of relief to be back in something that looks familiar. The problem with Photopea is it's not exactly like Photoshop, but it's very similar. So notice we brought this PNG in. There's a difference between the white of this X and the empty space. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of this white space. That's just for my design. So I'm going to go to the magic wand tool, right? Select it all and delete. So that the white's a cutout. Why did I want to do that? Well, that way I can double click on the layer, turn on the layer styles, and I want to give it a stroke on the outside, an offset. I want that stroke color not to be red, but to be white. Say OK. This is all very similar to Photoshop. I want its size to be big enough to see. So maybe, let's see, at this resolution, maybe something like 12 pixels. Let's try 12. At 100%, on the outside, it's a white stroke. Maybe that's too big. Let's see. Yeah, it's a little narrow in there. So in order to get a better sense of it, oh, why is everything? So if you ever get weird in your zooming, which was definitely happening there, you can just double click on the magnifying glass and it will fill the screen. My problem is I want to get the, there we go, the window itself to be back to 100%. Okay, so what I can do, like we've done in class, is make a new layer, edit, fill that new layer with middle gray, and then move it behind my PNG, right? This way that helps me see what my stroke should be. So let's make that stroke a little bit narrower. Maybe about like that. And then I can also add, if I want, a drop shadow. And that just kind of shows it off a little bit. So you can play with those settings. Then I'm going to turn it off. Turn off the gray background. Come on. There we go. And then I'm going to save this. So I'm going to export it as a PNG. Actually, first, let's save it as a PSD. It will go to downloads. Right, there it is. I can move that out. Let's see, to my folder. So now I have a PSD with those different layers, and then I can save it or export it as a PNG And this is a way, I know it's a pain to always have to go from downloads, but it just reminds you. Stop, I want to rename it with offset. Okay. And this is one I can also, because you're always allowed to put extra into PhotoBucket, but I might like this in PhotoBucket better than just the flat cutout like this. And so it's up to you. As long as it's a black shape, you can put an offset on it. You can put a drop shadow on it if you like. You can even do multiple versions. Vectors don't take up a whole lot of space. So I want you to know how to do that. But in order to add those, we have to bring it into Photopea. And that's why on our course outline today, it says working between Vector and Photopea to get the best results. But remember, the most important thing is to have an SVG saved of your vector shapes. That way we can output it at any size perfectly cleanly. So I'm just going to label this one. Ever the overachiever. You only need one black file, but I'm going to do two. What makes a good graphic image? It needs to be clear, simple, and versatile. So this is one option out of Vector, but then if you take that file and bring it into Photopea, it's very easy to make it, stand out like this. And it's very clean because it's a vector image. And I like the drop shadow specifically, especially with the stroke. It makes it feel like it has a little bit more movement, especially the water at the top. So you can have fun playing with those different aspects. So next, what is there to do? Well, if we wanted to add color, this is how I would recommend you do it. Within Photopea, hit Control-J, not Command-J, because it doesn't matter if you're on a Mac or a PC. By hitting Control-J on a browser-based program, it will duplicate. So that made a duplicate of my image, right? So now on that duplicate, I can double-click, and I can add color. Very simple color, like a color overlay. But I don't want red, so let's change that. Because this is water, I want to pick a blue. Maybe something like that. Whoop, I didn't hit the right thing. Come on. And it's just like Photoshop, it just might be a little slower. And then you want to say, okay. Okay, now, just like we've done before, I can also add a gradient overlay. But for it to show up, I'm going to turn down my color overlay to maybe about 70% opacity. And now I'm going to turn on a gradient. And I like the gradient that's already there, just a simple light to dark. Right? But if I wanted to, I could use the drop down and I could choose something a little crazier as well, right? And I can make my own gradient and I can alter it. That's kind of nice. So maybe I do this, but I change the color. And this should all, even though it's Photopea, it should all feel pretty familiar to you from what we've done in Photoshop before. That looks appropriately toxic. Come on. There we go. Okay. Okay. Maybe adjust